Welcome to Call of Your Soul.
Welcome to Call of Your Soul. This is episode 10 with Dan Ellis, my co host Amy Piper, and our special guest today, Lauren Smith. And before we dive in for today, if you're in a space to do so, just inviting you to a place of stillness and bring the eyes to a close. And bringing your awareness to the breath. Now inviting an intentional, deeper breath in. And exhale, letting it out. So, welcome, Amy. Welcome, Lauren. And to jump us off for today, Lauren, if you just want to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of give us an overview of what your current work is.
Sure. Super happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Lauren, and I am a mother of two. I am living in Atlanta, and I am a veterinarian and an animal communicator.
All right. Um, so, of course, we'll unfold a little bit more about the animal communication, but I think it'd be great to kind of go back to the roots and figure out sort of what was your inspiration for taking this path and going down the road of becoming a veterinarian, and then the skill set that evolved later into animal communication. So, I think there's a specific point in time that you wanted to refer back to. That was the inspiration for your connection with animals. So, would you like to go into that story?
Sure. I think that there was really never a time in my life where I did not find myself surrounded by animals, even if they were not my own. So my grandparents lived on a farm, and so no matter where my sister or my cousins were, I was usually either out by the cow pasture, at the fence line, and would have the cows come up, or in the barn where the barn cat and her kittens would be. I remember in the eighth grade, my bus driver called me Cat Lady, which was not a great look for an eighth grader. But every time he would come and pick me up, I would be sitting on the curb in our cul-de-sac, and all the neighborhood cats would be there. So I would be surrounded by five or six of my neighbors' cats, and then we always had cats growing up. So I mean, I think through my entire life, animals and I seem to always find each other.
Yeah. Was there a particular animal that you bonded with more than the others? And was there any difference between like domestic animals or animals that were on the farm versus, maybe animals out in the wild?
Um, no, I had cats growing up, but there was not any one in particular until I was in college, that I really, really bonded and connected with any more than others. It truly was always just looking for all the animals, and or they would find me. I do remember one time in college being out in the ocean. We were on a little boat with some of my buddies, and a wild dolphin just swam up, and I reached my hand out, and he just placed, his bottle nose on my hand, and I have a picture of it. Actually, yeah, it's one of the pictures that I have on my website. So, um, yeah, it really has not mattered if it was wild or domestic, or either one of.
And on that, I'll just interject. This is Amy Bear. That I've known Lauren for 7 or 8 years, and every time we are talking on the phone, my pets. I've had different pets through the years, and they show up and start surrounding me. it's it's really noticeable.
Love it.
So, Lauren, take us through. So you've had this, really established bond with animals. It's very clear that you have a resonance with them. At this point in your life, I'm sure it's you don't have a clear way to explain how or why this is. But as we sort of segue into that, maybe take us through your decision of making the career move of becoming a vet and what made you decide that.
Sure. I forever knew that I wanted to go into medicine. But for the longest time, I thought that I would go into human medicine and become a physician. And then when I was in between my junior and senior year of college, my own cat got hit by a car.
Mm.
And when we took her, my parents took her to the vet ended up saving her life. And I realized that I could help people by helping their pets. And when I came home that year for Thanksgiving, I think, I started to work with Dr. Stark and made the decision at that point to become a veterinarian and really never looked back. Yeah.
Wow, that's a beautiful story.
Hmm.
And the training that, from what little I know, it's actually quite similar, like the requirements of what a veterinary student has to go through, and then what a med student has to go through. It's quite comprehensive in what you need to know in order to go through that to become a doctor, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we do 4 years of college and then 4 years of vet school. And then, you know, now, especially, I did not go through extra training after that, but now, especially, many vets go on and do an internship and a residency just like you would in human medicine. And then, just the big difference is that although so many things are similar, we're obviously learning about a significantly larger number of
Mm-hmm.
species than one.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. And not to go too far off tangent here, but yeah, with as a physician, you have essentially one species, and of course, there's a lot of complexity with what kind of pickles we humans can get ourselves into. But you have many species of being to sort of be able to assess and to treat. And I'm sure with all like the anatomy and the biochemistry, there's quite a few differences between something like elephants and birds. Um, so I guess like how are you able to manage all that intellectually, and um, I guess how does that affect like your work as a veterinary, doing veterinary medicine?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I don't really have anything to compare it to, so it's just what we did. But we did learn, I remember in our anatomy class, we had small animals where we learned about dogs and cats, which are very similar. And then we moved to large animals where we learned about, horses and cows, and those are very different. Cows have four stomachs, where we have one. So, and now, like, I'm second guessing myself. I'm like 99% sure I haven't worked on a cow in over 20 years. Um, but you just learn it because that's what there is to learn. And so in those 4 years of vet school, we get a general knowledge of all of the species. Um, and those would include things that you would typically see in a person's home or on a farm. So we learned about, dogs and cats, and then horses, cows, goats, chickens. Um, and then there were electives that you could take that were about exotic animals or zoo animals. But most people who go into exotic medicine, and exotics are going to be like your pocket pets, gerbils, hamsters, reptiles, things like that, or zoo medicine, are going to go on and do either further education in an internship in a residency or on the job training at a veterinary clinic that specializes in those.
Yeah, because that's a lot more species to have to look after. So yes, that
Yes.
makes
Well, and
sense.
even among breeds of dogs, for example, I mean, like I'm a Great Pyrenees kind of gal, and I know that the Pyres have, for example, a system that you can't give them the same amount of anesthesia that you normally would for their size, because of the way their system is. So, I would imagine there's quite a bit of difference even among the breeds. Is that right, Lauren?
There are. I mean, it really does come down, to things like anesthesia, so it's not that there's a huge body of knowledge that we have to know that's
Oh,
different, but there are some very specific things that are different.
And so, Lauren, you had mentioned before, like earlier on in your life, you were more scientific minded, probably more apt to use the left hemisphere of your brain. So I'm just curious, as you've gone through this journey and where you sit now, how do you look back upon yourself at that time? And what do you think you would have said in your, finishing up vet school in your 20s about um, the sort of the intuitive ability that you have now?
Mm. So, I think that I was not aware of my intuition when it came to animals for a long time. Um, Looking back, I know that I have been intuitively connected forever. Um, and it's something that has grown and strengthened, but it's something that I always had access to. I think my path is exactly what it needed to be because I think that I have opportunities now because I'm a veterinarian that my hope is that it will end up helping pets across the world in a way that I could not have helped them had I only moved forward with animal communication. But I do know looking back that even when I thought it was lacking, I actually was intuitively connected.
Yeah,
well, in saying that, it's like, one of those things that because we're always in our own body mind, that, um, it is the way that it is, and we don't necessarily have, we're not inside other people to compare how we experience the world and how they do.
Exactly.
So, for many people who are highly intuitive in various ways, there's not really an awareness of that maybe until later in life. It's just how you experience the world.
Right. And, other people who I was aware of who were highly intuitive, oftentimes they would get
Mm,
pictures in their
hmm.
mind, and that wasn't happening for me at that time. And so I just assumed that that was the only way that you received information or that somebody received information. And so learning more about intuition and that kind of connection helped me to understand that my main source of receiving information is just different than that.
right.
Yeah, that's an important thing for any intuitive is, we don't really recognize until maybe we've done some training that there are so many different ways that people receive information, and we have our primary way, and then we have maybe some secondary and tertiary ways. And it's really important to recognize that. And then also, there's what it tends to focus on. Like with you, it tends to focus on animals.
Absolutely. And even within animals, so when I'm practicing with a group of the people that I went through my training with, we all receive common
Hmm.
themes, and then we also may receive different pieces of information. It's like we all have the radio on, but we might be tuned to just a little bit of a different station than the other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes a team so valuable,
Mhm.
in certain situations.
Yeah, and I'm really curious because I had sort of a similar arc where I had training in statistical analysis and econometrics. And most of my training through college was very scientifically oriented and very centered around math and studying data. So I'm really curious to sort of hear of how you went through this transition from being someone who was very scientifically minded, right, studying medicine, and you kind of have a rigorous sort of framework that you have to work upon in relationship, to your work and how you apply it, and then how this how you're able to get in touch with this intuitive gift and sort of taking you into being able to be an animal communicator.
So I went through school. I graduated. I worked in a mixed animal practice where I worked on, I mean, any number of different animals. So dogs, cats, farm animals. We had a small zoo that we worked for. So I remember helping to give birth to a buffalo. We
Whoa.
worked with, it was so cool. We worked on wallabies, it would llamas,
Wow.
alpacas, I mean, everything. And at that point, I think I was just trying to do my absolute best for every animal that was in front of me and was very, very focused on the science and on the medicine. I moved from there and started working strictly in small animals with dogs and cats. Um, when I realized that the farmers that I was working with really knew a lot more about so many things than I did, and I just felt like to serve the animals best, I needed to really narrow my field. So I went and started working in small animal. Um, and then about 5 years into practice, I started working in emergency. And by that point, I felt really comfortable with a lot of what I was seeing. And so my brain almost started to be able to relax a little bit. And and I wasn't so stressed out every day of, "Oh my gosh, am I gonna get this right?" Um, and so it started to happen, where a technician would bring back a history and just give me a little bit of information, and, maybe I'd seen the pet, maybe I hadn't yet, but I would just form an idea of and that's not even a good way to put it. I didn't form anything. An idea would pop in my head of what was going on with the pet. And I think if you were a veterinarian listening to this, they may say, well, of course. But it was oftentimes things that did not seem super obvious just from that amount of information. And so I just kind of sat with it for a long time and noticed that it was happening more and more and more. And then when I moved to Atlanta, I completely changed my veterinary career trajectory and started working solely in end of life care, which was mostly in home euthanasia and then a little bit of hospice work. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Um, and what I found was I would really center myself and enter into a much, much more relaxed, almost meditative state before I would go into a family's home. And then I had the opportunity, because we weren't on a timeline, to just sit and listen. And families love to talk about their pets. It's a beloved
Mhm.
part of their family. And so I found that that information was coming more and more often. I remember specifically a family talking about the pet that we were seeing, but then he pointed to a picture on the wall and he said, and this was, you know, Fluffy's brother, and he died of, and before he said the word, in my head, I heard the word seizures. And he said he died of seizures. And I was like, "Well, whoa." And I mean, that is not a super, super common thing for a pet to die of. So I just noticed that that was happening more and more often. And it got to the point that it happened so often that I started to believe it myself. And I wanted to get to the place that I could make it happen every single time.
I want to comment there on how much I appreciate the humility that you described, Lauren, when you said that you recognized, that many farmers knew more in some ways than yourself, even after all your training. I think that humility is so important in intuitive interpretation.
Mm.
And I really appreciate that you had the humility after all of the work you've done and all of the training to recognize that. And that led you to shift your practice into a specified direction. And also just what you're describing is that journey that intuitives take of finding external confirmation or lack of confirmation, right,
Mhm.
for what the information we're receiving. And I think that's something that a lot of times people are not aware of how much trained intuitives walk through that process so that we can trust the information and know when we're not sure whether to trust it. And so I think that you just said a lot there, more than perhaps you even realized you were saying
Yeah, thank
about
you.
your journey. Yeah.
Amy, you and I have over the years talked a lot about this, but because of the license that I hold,
Mm-hmm.
but more so because of who I am, doing animal communication with integrity is the most important thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because I'm speaking or helping to speak for a being that does not have a voice that a lot of people can hear right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the connection that families have with their pets, I just think that having the clearest communication and the most integrity in that interpretation is just of utter importance. Um, and so I appreciate you bringing those points up.
Yeah. And, I mean, I can vouch for that with you. I've known you so long and I've known you through your journey of recognizing this intuitive ability and then your desire to bring that out more and how challenging
Mhm.
it was for you because of this very question and that you've questioned every step of the way. um, and, and I agree. I mean, I think that's so important and so valuable. And I mean, I remember when before we even started talking about that part of your experience that you did mention that when you walked into a home that it felt like you were flipping a switch. That was the
Mhm.
phrase I remember you using. Like, I flip a switch and then something happens. And that was kind of where our conversation started about this part of your gift.
Absolutely. And I think that I've come to understand that a few things around that flipping the switch. And, one is that I walk around um, in my regular day somewhat turned off. So, I'll see 10 dogs as I'm walking my kids to school, and I'm not having full conversations with each and every one of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I think I would be completely overwhelmed at all times.
Yeah.
But that flipping of the switch is kind of what I described earlier of the centering myself and grounding myself and moving into my heart space and moving into almost a meditative state before I walk in and hold space and interact with families.
Yeah, that grounded and open space where your antenna are open,
Mhm.
but you're still grounded. And I agree. I mean, that's one of the things that a lot of times when intuitives come to me, they are receiving too much information
Mhm.
from all over the place and it's kind of random and they haven't set their parameters yet for, what I really want to hear and when I really want to hear it. And by hear, I mean receive information.
Mhm.
And so, that's something that you seemed to have right off the bat without having to work at it. But not everybody has that right off the bat and they have to learn it. So that's kind of cool that you knew how to do that. You just kind of knew.
Yeah, yeah. I do. I think it hindered me for a minute because I wasn't aware that I was receiving information,
Hmm.
but once I was aware, I was super glad that I knew how to, that I did know how to turn it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question, Lauren, because it seems like your choice to then choose specifically like a small animal care and then going into end of life care is what then gave you enough space and then required less of your brain for like this gift to sort of be able to bloom. And I'm just sort of curious if you had any sense in making those choices that this was part of the outcome, or was it sort of an unintended consequence, like you just felt intuitively like this is what I want to go into, and then your gift sort of started to
Yeah,
bloom?
it was absolutely the second. I mean, I had no idea that this is where I would head. Um, and in fact, I think I almost fought against it for a while, and it was
Mm.
I don't think it was an unintended consequence. I think it was being led down a path and
Yeah.
being guided. Um, but I won't say that I was necessarily even um, guided very easily. So the choices to move into end of life care, that was very easy. But the choice then to open up to animal communication was much harder.
Yeah, and I'm sure it took some time as you're sort of wading through like what is
Yes.
this, and trying to figure out like is what I'm receiving real? Is it correct? Does it
Yes.
resonate? And Amy, I'm sure you can also attest to how challenging it can be. And I appreciate your correcting the language. I'm still sort of in the first half of your journey with the scientific language, so replacing unintended consequence. But as we're walking down the path, we have some aversion, right, to what our calling is. And there's some challenges that come up that we may feel like we're not ready to carry out yet. So I'm sure all of us have had quite a few instances where we feel like we're not prepared for what we're being called to do.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to sort of wonder where the course that you took on animal communication, I believe her name was Clara, who you took the course with, sort of where did that fit in, and how did this expound your skill set, especially relative to like the intuitive part that was already coming through in receiving the communication from the animals nonverbally?
So about 3 years ago, I finally said, okay, this is real. This is happening. I can't make it happen all the time. I need to learn how to do this and I need somebody to teach me. And I remember very specifically holding this image in my head when I was in high school. And this will date me a little bit, but they had those pictures where you looked at, a lot of times they were posters, and you looked at the poster and it was just a bunch of squiggly lines. But if you shifted the way you looked at it, all of a sudden a 3D image would pop off. So are either of you like familiar with what I'm talking about or not at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I forget what it's called,
I
but
did
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Anyway, but that's so I remember sitting in the car with my dad. He put one of those in front of me. And I was like, "What is this?" And he said, "Look through it. Don't look at it, look through it." And immediately the image popped off the page. And so as I decided that I wanted to learn animal communication, that was the image that I held in my head. I need somebody who can teach me in the same way that my dad said, this is how you have to shift the way you look at something. And
Mm.
so I got online and just Googled animal communication classes. And there were not many that I found. I mean, I remember thinking, like, you don't often get to the end of a search, like, and I've only seen 5 pages. And so I opened up each website, and a lot of them I knew were just not for me. And then I found Dr. Kara's, and her name's Dr. Kara Gubbins, and she's out of California, and she's a PhD biologist. And that number one was like, okay, she is a scientist. Her
Mhm.
brain works the same way that my brain does. And then when I started learning more, I really felt very connected to her and her method of teaching. And so I remember getting on the phone with her, and I mean, I was standing in my kitchen. I don't know that I'll ever forget that conversation. And we started talking, and I started taking a class with her. And then I had kind of my breakthrough moment in my first class that I took with her, and it's all been a fantastic ride since then.
Mm. What, if you don't mind just expanding on do you think were some of the most key elements that Dr. Kara was able to teach you in that course?
One of the main things that I remember learning was about the different ways of receiving information. So I mentioned
Mm.
earlier that the people that I had known previously would get pictures, and that was not something that came very easily to me in the beginning. But and I'll probably forget them, but you can see images, you can hear things in your brain or in your mind, if you will. You can know things, you can feel things. And I feel like there's a fifth one that I'm missing. But what I realized was my main way of connecting, at least initially, is through feeling. And so when I'm in a session with a family and a pet, I will feel emotions first. And when I describe those emotions and the family is like, yep, that's him, then I know that I'm connected.
Mhm.
And so that was a really big body of learning for me. And also a really nice realization that, oh, wait, I've been doing that my whole life. I just thought that that happened to everybody. I thought
Mm.
that when everybody looked at a picture of a dog, they were able to feel in their body that that dog was a grumpy dog or that that dog was a happy dog. Um, and then afterwards, when I would talk to people, they're like, "What are you even talking about?" Oh, okay. So no, that doesn't happen to everybody. Um, and then the other thing that I feel like she really focuses on is mindset. And that is, what are the things that you hold within your brain, within your soul, that are blocking you from being open to receiving? And those
Mhm.
things are different for everybody. Um, and so through her coursework, um, you encounter those mindset things, and then she gives different tools to help to clear those so that you can be open to communication.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Would you be willing to share like what maybe one of those was for you?
Yes. I think the biggest one for me was being able to say the words, "I am an animal communicator."
Mm.
Mhm.
Um, being willing to talk about it, being willing to share that, um, because and I still find myself really struggling sometimes with the fact that, like, people are gonna think I'm crazy. Like, "You talk to
Yeah.
animals? What?" Um, and I just kind of like now I'm like, "Yep," and it's pretty amazing. Um,
Own it.
yeah, and a lot of that is I mean, Atlanta's a big city, and also the veterinary community is not huge. And these are people that have trusted me with their clients and with the families that they help and with the pets that they help over 10 years. And so I'm known as someone who can be trusted to take care of families and their pets in some of their most sensitive moments. And now all of a sudden, I'm adding this dimension, like not to the practice, like they're very, very separate, but I'm also doing this. And that's a scary thing. Will people still trust me? Will people, still think that I can help their families and their families' pets? Or is this going to make me lose my credibility? Is this going to make me lose my license? Those are my most vulnerable points and my biggest fears.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess talk us through like how you manage um, the scope of practice that you're sort of required to work under as a vet, a licensed vet, and then this emerging skill and gift that you have, which is a really beautiful, important service, especially to bring healing and communication and connectedness to the family that you're working with. I guess how you manage sort of serving both needs without one compromising the other.
Yeah. I think it is still a work in progress. Um, as a veterinarian, I'm a veterinarian. And um, unless a family says to me, man, I really wish I knew what he was thinking. Or unless a family comes to me and says, I heard you do both of these things. Um, I don't talk about the communication side of things. Now, then, sometimes I'll hedge my bets, and I'll have a dog who I feel, and I mean, okay, honestly, one of the most beautiful things is that almost every time I'm with a family, there's so much gratitude pouring off of a pet at their time of death that I am able to say wholeheartedly, "I hope you know how grateful Fluffy is for everything that you've given to him or her." And so that is just an easy thing to say because I know it to be true. It may be directly communicated, and a family can almost always receive that. Um, I think more so it comes into play when I'm doing animal communication sessions because as a veterinarian, as a licensed vet, I am not allowed to diagnose or prescribe or even honestly give medical advice unless I have put my hands on a pet and talked with the owner kind of all in the same moment. It's called a veterinary client patient relationship. And it's the basis for our practice and our licensing. And so when a family calls me and they want to talk about whether or not, you know, what's going on with their dog. They've been to 3 different vets and they can't get answers. I can't go in and say, "Well, your dog has cancer," or "Your dog, ate a pair of underwear." Like, those things would be diagnosing. And so it is one of those things that the best I have come up with is having families, number one, like sign a consent form that says, this is not veterinary medicine. We are
Mm,
not diagnosing. I absolutely am not prescribing any medications. This is very similar to Amy knowing in her intuitive self, like, I think that, I think that this or that is going on with my thumb. And so I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to say, I think that this is what's going on with my thumb. And I've heard about this medication that I think might help. But then that doctor is ultimately going to be the one that says, yeah, let's get some x-rays and let's prescribe this medication. Or, you know what, that medication's not going to work, but this one might. And so any information that comes through is more just what the pet thinks might be going on.
Mm,
And I share that with the family, and then the family needs to go to their own veterinarian and get true diagnostics and a diagnosis and any kind of medications or treatments that might help.
oh, thank you for that clarity, Lauren. I really appreciate understanding how you've come to handle that.
Yeah, it still feels risky, but it's the best that I can do and still feel like, because ultimately I do feel it's really important for the pet's voice to be heard.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because oftentimes they do have an idea of what's going on with their body.
Hmm.
And and so I feel like it's important to say those things, but I think that those parameters are essential.
Yeah, and like you said, with having the like the form that releases liability and separates, like in this role, I'm just as an animal communicator, and then they go to their own vet for the treatment. Like I think that's a really solid way to sort of keep yourself protected and having a very distinct separation between the scopes of practices of each type of work.
Yeah. And that's why you know, I have two separate businesses. I do not do animal communication in my veterinary business, and I don't do veterinary like medicine in my animal communication business.
Yeah, and it's this is to protect your licensing and your reputation, but I just want to comment again. During the time that I've known you, it's very clear that just as important is your sense of integrity and knowing that you are operating in a way that is aligned with the well-being of the pet and the people. And I know that
Thank you.
about you. I've known you long enough. I mean, it's just that's very clear that that's equally important to you, and I think that's an important point. It also reminds me of I have many psychotherapists in my practice, and some of them have decided to become coaches as well because it's a broader scope of what they can assist with. And,
Mhm.
there has to be a separation because of the licensing
Yeah,
laws. And that's really important. And, you know, learning how to separate those two things, it's a challenge. And it's really important. So I appreciate how hard you have, how much attention you've put on that.
So, Lauren, I'm sure a lot of people are curious, and kind of want to dive into the nature of this relationship and exchange of the animals. And you had mentioned in an earlier call, every animal has a distinct purpose, and so maybe this can kind of segue us into a little bit deeper of the nuts and bolts of the animal communication, and helping sort of shine a light on what a lot of sort of misunderstanding about perhaps why they're here, and what they bring into our lives, since they don't have, like you said, their own voice in English that we can understand. So maybe kind of talk a little bit about that distinct purpose, and how you've received that from some of the animals that you've been in communication with.
so in general, and I think probably if you ask me again in 5 years, it may change, but the best I can understand how this communication works is that my understanding is that we all have an energy field around us, including animals, both wild and pets. And it's like I consciously extend my energy field to meet theirs. And that doesn't have to be in person. That can be, in fact, I really only function over the phone or over Zoom and work with a picture. And so, where those energy fields meet, information can be exchanged. Um, Purpose, I believe that we're all here for a purpose. Um, and and our pets and honestly wild animals too um, are also. And I have heard any number of different stories from animals as to why they're here. Um, I have heard of pets that are here um, solely in this lifetime as a companion. And the way that felt to me in my body was so incredibly like restful. It almost felt like a reward. And that was not directly communicated from the animal, other than it just is the way it felt in my body. And so I remember that one particular pet was here as a companion for the mom. But we were talking about whether or not that pet was ready to transition, and she very much so was. And she knew that when she transitioned and was no longer in her dog form, that her new role was going to be as a protector for the daughter. And it was a really like, a lot of emotion came through, as I was delivering that message, and I was curious how it was gonna land with the woman that I was speaking with, and she said, "I've known since the day my daughter was born that she was a warrior, and I was curious when she left my protection how she would be taken care of."
Mm,
And so it was a really like it was a message that resonated completely with the woman. And it was really profound for me. Um, I have connected with pets who almost felt like they had some karma, if you will, to work out. Um, but it was almost as if they got to work it out in an animal's body, in a pet's body, instead of in a human body. And I don't know if that had to do with, they only had a little bit to do. And so they got to do it in a shorter time where they could be well taken care of. But there were some things from previous lifetimes that they had to work out. Um, a lot of times, pets come forward as teachers for the families that they're with. I see that a lot. One of them recently was talking to me about how he was present to help his mom work on codependency and help her to realize that she was enough even if she wasn't taking care of somebody else. And it was really interesting because it was not a forceful lesson. It was, I'm here and I'm willing to offer you this lesson, but it's up to you on whether or not you take it. And the looseness with which he held that lesson was really amazing to
mm.
see.
And that's a really interesting topic that you brought up, the pet being a sort of teacher and having like a lesson or maybe even a couple lessons for the owners that they're in relationship to. Um, I know you said you have some of your own pets at home and they've had some tough lessons to teach you. Maybe would you have an example that you might be comfortable sharing of that relationship and what was taught to you through the communication through your pet?
Sure. I have a little Pomeranian, and I adopted him when he was 8 months old. And when he came home, he was peeing on everything in the house. And I, like, put him in diapers. I was like, I didn't know if I could even keep him. Like, I was like, "This is not how do I function with a dog that pees on all of my stuff?" And finally, I was in Dr. Kara's class, and so I was like, "Fine," and I I guess I'll communicate with you. And I, got real quiet and started, and the message came through so clearly of, "You don't set boundaries in your own home, so I'm gonna set them for you."
Mm.
And I was like, oh, okay, you're not wrong about that." And as soon as, like, I acknowledged it and made a shift, he stopped peeing, and he has not peed in my house once since then. And and by the way, there's a lot to be said, like, I don't mind at all working with behavior cases, and they are complex.
Mm.
So I'm not making a guarantee that one communication session will solve all of the behavior problems with your pet. It is a little more tender for me with my dog Tilly. She's a lab, and she's 6 years old, and I adopted her when she was 8 months old also. Um, she needs me in a way that is very difficult for me. I think she would be happiest if she could crawl inside my skin. And that is very difficult for me. I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. I own now 2 businesses. I have a lot of responsibility. Um, and to have another being that needs me is difficult. And I will be very honest in that I have not held direct communication with her around that because I don't know that I'm ready to hear what she has to say. Um, so yeah, that's about the most honest I can be about that.
No, and that's beautiful, and it's really interesting how one was like you don't set enough boundaries, and the other one is trying to crawl inside your skin as if you don't have any boundaries at all.
Fair enough, Dan.
Right. There goes Dan's intelligent awareness.
Right.
Lovely. It also occurs to me to comment a little bit on my experience with my pets because as a practitioner, I also am present for a lot of other people and other beings. And my pets have made it clear that they are here for me as a way of balancing out. Like we're here for you, taking care of your need for connection, your need for unconditional love that you offer to so many. And my dog of choice is usually a Great Pyrenees, and they're guardians and shepherds. They're nurturing and they're protective, which to me is just the perfect combination. But also, when I have a client that comes into the home or into
Mhm.
the office, they very much are excited and they feel comforted by the Pyrenees. And when I take my Pyrenees out, like to a festival or something, they just elicit so much joy. And I mean, children are just magnetized to them. There's usually like all these children, it's like they're glued on to the dog. And it gives them an opportunity to share. They start to share with me the stories of their pets. And it's just really important to them. I can feel how important it is to them to have a chance to share the story of their pet with someone who's listening and paying attention to their experience with their pet. And then sometimes the parents will come over and then the parents will start their stories, right, with their pets.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting, but also, in asking, like, how are my dogs served in return? Well, one is, they're my besties, so I really do take care of them, but also they've shown me that their vibration expands when they're with me because they're
Mm.
in a field of energy that has an expanded vibration, and that's a very simple like you were saying, why in an animal form rather than a human form? It's a very simple way for that to happen. It's simply by absorbing, um, a very yin, receiving of that rather than having to effort or try to make that happen. So I just thought that was a relevant thing to share at this point, just another perspective on the purposes and yeah, how that works between humans and animals sometimes.
Amy, your sharing of that, um, and I'm going to get emotional here for just a second. So, your sharing of that feels like a receiving of the message that Tilly has been trying to give to me
Mm.
forever of like, I am enough exactly how I am. Like, I am um, deserving of the ridiculous amount of unconditional love. Let me crawl in your skin because of exactly who you are. And it's like, as you said that, and as those thoughts came to me, like they settled in my soul, and in my bones. I really do believe that that that's it. That that's the message that she's been trying to give.
Yeah, and that's interesting because when you told about that message coming to your previous client, I identified with that too. And I thought, oh, that's one of the messages that I'm receiving too, that
Mm.
I am enough even when I'm not
Mm.
providing something for another person. And that comes from my nature. And it also comes from
Right.
some of my background, where I had mentally ill parent that, I was not enough, right? I could never be enough
Yeah.
for that person. So it came out of, that mistaken understanding of myself came out of a wounding. And it also came out of part of just my natural emanation of care. And so that's interesting. And I just feel like it's really amazing and lovely that that came through right now because I wonder how many people of our listeners are also receiving that message right now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine quite a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting. I was reading recently about the first noble truth from the Buddha, and it's commonly known as suffering. But when you get down to the more complex understanding, a lot of what it's saying is speaking more to the suffering as a result of our conditioned state of being. And it's like we have these experiences that convince us that something that may not actually be true about ourselves, like we're not enough, or like we're not good enough, or like we're not smart enough, convinces us that that's true. And then we believe that. And then we put that out into our energy field and then attract the same experience um, to reoccur with more people and more animals and more beings. And so those lessons sometimes take quite a lot of time to sort of unwind and the emotional entanglements and really uproot those really stubborn beliefs to then realize that that maybe wasn't true in the first place. And it seems like the pets can really provide that sort of teaching. And I think the basis of that unconditional love for us as humans, and maybe this is why we've seen more pet ownership, especially for dogs and cats in the last 20 years, has been the accessibility of the unconditional love from the pets. Is more accessible than it may be from humans sometimes, and it's just a really beautiful service that they give us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. That, I mean, I think that in some circles that's called secondary suffering. There's the primary suffering of just life events that can cause pain, but then there's the secondary suffering we inadvertently create for ourselves through what you called conditioning. And yeah, what a beautiful thing. How many animals are here trying to help us receive a corrective message? And, you know, we may really be struggling to receive it.
Yeah, 100%. And in that vein, maybe we shift into the relationship between the pet and the owner. And you had mentioned before, Lauren, that some pets are comfortable in that sort of parent fur baby dynamic, but
Mhm.
some of them have a little bit different interpretation of what that relationship's like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my go-to was, my filter was kind of mom, dad, and then, fur baby, if you will. And then I remember connecting, I don't remember the exact pet, but I remember the the knowing of, like, I went and said something about your mom, and it was all wrong. And I was like, "Whoa, what just happened here?" And very quickly the animal was able to show me, um, and it came through as a picture, and it was like a triangle, but it was a triangle laid on its side, where everybody was equal. So there were 2 adults and the dog, and everybody was an equal. There wasn't a mom, there wasn't a dad, they were all just 3 beings in this home. And I said to the family, "You guys are not mom and dad, are you?" And they were like, "Oh, no, absolutely not." And, like, they were aware of the dynamic and were somewhat amused by it, because I think that they would have been very comfortable being mom and dad, but they knew from the dog, "No, no, we are all, like, equal here." And it was something that they were able to readily, kind of hold on to and be okay with. So it was really fun. And then I think last time we talked, I feel like with Amy that you kind of, yours is somewhere in between, like, or maybe that you kind of oscillate between, parent and equal.
Yeah, and even the third oscillation where, because Puck is my protector and my teacher. So,
Yes.
I'm the
Yeah.
nurturer like the parent, and I call myself mommy bear, right, to him, and I
Mhm.
call him my fur baby. But it's very clear that he is, an adult guardian, and that he is often my teacher. So, yeah, it does. The script kind of flips, and both are true.
What's that like for you and your current 2 pets, Lauren?
Oh, I am 100% the parent. I provide all the things. They get to just play and be, and I take care of them.
So you
So,
have you have 4 kids.
yeah, I do, absolutely.
Except that you also had the realization that Tilly is offering you all this unconditional
Yes.
love, which is sort of a parental role, right?
Yes, yes, it is. It's one, I don't know, I might have to ease into, the accepting of that one.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny.
It's like our favorite word, Amy. It's multidimensional, right?
Yes.
That's right, that's
It's
right.
never just one dynamic. So I had the question earlier, um, and this was more mechanical, but I think it sheds light on the transference of the information. If whether for you the transmission that you have between the animal, and I know it may be different for your own pets first one versus ones that you're working with, because a lot of times that's like a remote consultation. But is this exchange, are you typically exchanging information with the pet out loud? Like when you're verbalizing back, or is this happening, in a more subtle state where the information isn't expressed orally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in Kara's coursework, a lot of the way we start working is silently with a pet, and then maybe taking notes and then giving the notes or giving a verbal account to the family. Or, maybe finding a pet on that you see on Facebook who is lost, and getting information that way. And maybe you don't even know who to relay that information to, so you're just gathering information. Um, the way that I like to work best is on the phone or on Zoom or in person with a family and the pet, so that it truly is a conversation. And so I always start my session with asking if the pet wants to bring anything forward. I feel like it's a privilege that we get to do this, and I want to make sure that they know that the main thing is for them to have a voice. And so, start with what would you like to say, and then I relay that information. It's not like, hi, my name is Fluffy and I am a beagle, so it's not like I am just saying the words. I try to do as little interpretation as possible. I try to just say, Fluffy is showing me a picture of this, and then let the interpretation come from that, versus me interpreting what Fluffy is saying. But sometimes I think the interpretation comes no matter what. Um, but I find that when I am talking and the family is involved, that it makes a whole lot more sense. And I'm able to say, does this resonate or does it not? And if they come back and they say, oh my gosh, that makes complete sense because of XYZ, then I can feel from the pet, oh yeah, like we're on the right track and we can go deeper. Or the family says, this doesn't make any sense at all. And I can go back to the pet and say, like, what more can you tell me about that? And then there's times that the family's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And the pet will continue to bring up this same thing. And I'm like, we're not getting it. Like, they're putting something out here, and you, family, and I are not getting it. But because we're all there together, the pet will maybe bring it forward in a different way, or I'll have a different understanding. And there's a specific feeling within my body when, like, we've nailed it. Like, okay, we got it this time. And so I feel like that depth doesn't happen unless I'm connected in with the family and the pet.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody's got to be open for it to really transpire, it seems.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and this would be a question for both of you in relationship to your own pets. Um, I think I remember you saying before, like, my pet always expects a response. But is there any difference in when you communicate with them verbally or when you send it through your mind?
I find that I trust my communications with my pets more when I'm verbal, which is not the case when I'm in session. When I'm in session, I fully trust in my mind and verbally with the pet. But it's like I've tested myself and, like, tried to say, oh, okay, now I'm going to tell Tilly to sit, but I'm only going to use my mind. And, like, it just doesn't work. And I don't know why it doesn't work. I don't know. I'm probably in my head too much at that point. But I do completely trust that when I am talking with my words to my pets, that they know exactly what I'm talking about. And that goes for Tilly sit all the way up to, Tilly, I'm really sorry, but I have to go back out. I've got to go pick up the kids. I know that you've been home all day by yourself, but I've got to leave for another 2 hours. Like, I honestly believe that she's like, okay, mom, I got it. Cool. Thanks for letting me know what's happening.
I was just clarifying if you were saying that to her out loud or if you could, like,
Yes.
send that. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I say everything out loud. I talk to my pets out loud all day long.
And this might be a good point to kind of interject about vibrational fields, because a lot of people don't really understand that the material world generates vibrational fields all the time. And so, our thoughts are a vibrational field. Our bodies generate a vibrational field because they move in particular ways. This is more on the metaphysical science side. And so, that may have a lot to do with how we communicate. So, it's not mystical in the sense that someone might think of it as mystical. It's just the truth of vibrational fields interacting with each other. And some of us are more attuned to that subtlety. I call it subtle sense awareness. And some of us are less attuned to the subtlety. And, some of us would like to be less attuned to it than we are. And some would like to be more attuned to it, than we are. And these are skill sets that can be built. And even if you have a natural talent for it, it's like anything, math or music, you have a natural talent for that, it just comes through. You can choose whether you want to develop that more fully and also what you want to do with it. So, this is how I understand this kind of communication. So, whether I'm speaking out loud or whether I'm not to my animals, I feel like the animals are highly attuned to vibrational fields. And you might notice that there are times when a cat or a dog that you're very familiar with is very intent, perhaps gazing in a particular direction where you're like, there's nothing there. What are you, what are you staring at, or
Mhm.
you seem to be like really, really listening. And you're kind of wondering what that's about. And it could be in those occasions that there's a vibrational field that they're attuning to that you might not be aware of. So, do you have anything to add to that, Lauren or Dan? I just thought it might be a good point to bring that in.
No, for sure. And I think the only thing that I would add is this is even understood by the scientific community. So I read a book by Daniel Siegel called The Developing Mind. And like within the first like 30 pages, he makes a very clear distinction between our physical organ, which is the brain, and then what he called the mind. And this is basically the way in which we're transmitting information that isn't through ordinary senses.
Mm.
And I thought that was a great distinction, even by someone who's like, I think he was a medical doctor, but just I think he was a neurologist. So, like, actually giving us a framework by which we can have a way to understand that there is communication, there is transmission of vibratory frequencies where we can transmit information that's beyond just the senses themselves. So, there even is a scientific foundation for this type of exchange.
Very cool.
Lauren, if what would you, if there was one thing, I guess you could wish that pet owners would know relative, to animal communication, and being able to understand their pets more, what would you say that might be?
Um, I think just an awareness that communication is happening all the time. So I believe that, I believe and I have seen that people are communicating with their pets all the time, verbally and non verbally. Our pets are communicating with us all the time. We may not always be able to receive it. But I think if people just were aware of that in and of itself, that would be a huge step towards towards a better existence for all of us. And I feel like we already have a great existence with our pets, and it can only get better.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'd like to just highlight give you the opportunity to shed a little bit more light on this. You had mentioned before, like the pets have a very distinct purpose, and a lot of times they have a relationship to us, which just takes that of a teacher. And there was something that you felt intuitively like it very may be possible that some of the pets that are here embodied on Earth now may in fact be a bit older souls than us humans now, as we come to be able to understand more of what it is that they have to offer us.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I feel like pets really nail unconditional love.
Mhm.
Um, and that's
Yeah.
something that we as humans struggle with. Um, and I do. I think that, I guess part of me knows that any being here on earth in whatever form can be a teacher. Um, and all of us can be students. And I think that there's a really excellent possibility that we come into this life intentionally choosing to have the opportunity to learn, and that our pets are some of our best teachers, and some of the teachers that we can learn from the best if we allow ourselves to realize that is a possibility of and one of the main reasons that they're here with us.
Yeah, and one of the ways of learning is simply, as I mentioned earlier, through just reception, absorption. Just
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
if the animal is emanating unconditional love, then, you know, can we open ourselves to that? And if we can't, it gives us a good, like you said, that is it Dr. Kara that she had said, what gets in the way of your receiving the
Right.
communication? It's a good question. What gets in the way of receiving the unconditional love? And it points to
Mhm.
something, some of that conditioning that Dan was talking about. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that ends up creating a secondary and unnecessary suffering for
Yeah.
us. And I don't mean unnecessary as in there's something wrong with us having that problem, but more like, hey, if we can clear this up, then we don't have to keep suffering that same thing because it's
Right.
it's unnecessary and secondary.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. On that topic, or kind of springing from that, I'm wondering about. Would you like to talk about a little bit about your trip to Africa, happened there, and how that affected you?
Amy, I had always been, I don't know how to say it, called to Africa. It was always a place, I mean, it was the number one place that I wanted to go. And when I met Dr. Kara and in our second time talking, I told her that, and she said, "Lauren, I'm leading a trip um, next year." And I said, "Well, I'm going." And I spent 10 days there with her and a group, and we communicated primarily with white lions, and then also spent a day in Kruger. And it was just a profound experience. And I learned a lot from from the lions, specifically the lionesses, about motherhood and, um, so many people talk about a mama bear, and that never resonated with me. That's not who I am. And in being around and communicating with the lions, it was became very, very obvious to me that lioness is very much so who I am. Uh,
Hmm.
and then just not on a communication point, but just falling asleep every night. The lions would come around our camp and, there was a fence protecting us, but they would serenade us to sleep every night with their roars,
Hmm.
and it was just absolutely amazing, and a life-changing it was a before and after kind of, life-changing event for me.
Wow. So the animals are roaring. Is this because they're hunting, or is this just they're communicating or expressing? Like what's that about?
Yeah, the women who were in the camp who took such amazing care of us while we were there, um, told us later that when there are visitors at the camp, that they come and they just talk,
Wow.
at night before they go to bed, and then when there are not visitors, they don't come. So it was very much so almost just kind of like, "Hey, we're glad you're here." And, um, and that was it. It was very simple, but really amazing.
Wow, that is amazing. That's just crazy. I love that. And I just thought, you said Kruger, and not everybody might know about Kruger National Park. Would you just like clarify a little about what that is?
Yeah, it's a national park in South Africa, and so we spent a day with a guide who was with the guide was with us for the entire time, but in that day he took us. His name is Ruben, and he took us into the national park, and so we were just in our um, in our open top trucks and got to see the animals and take pictures and just spend a day. And I'll tell you, that day, I had to turn off the communication because I was so overwhelmed by
Mm-hmm.
just this is something I've been wanting to do my entire life, and here I am. That I couldn't relax. I was so excited, but I couldn't relax. And so I just like let myself be excited all day long and take pictures and share with the people that I was with, and it was great.
That always makes me think of when our babies and our toddlers are screaming their heinies off and we can't figure out why. Because a lot of times it's just overstimulation,
Mm,
and I think it's really an important thing for us to recognize in ourselves when we're overstimulated. And I mean that's another whole topic, but I feel like that sometimes we might not be aware that some of our overstimulation is coming from a more subtle sense or intuitive connection, and we might not really realize that. So, a topic for another time, but I still thought it was relevant
yeah,
to point
absolutely.
out. Yeah, yeah, and you knew that, and you knew what to do. So,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Lauren, do you want to maybe talk? I know this last year has been trying in a bit new, unique ways for you, and it sounds like the wild animals came and gave you an etheric visit when you were hospitalized. So maybe just recount a little bit of that experience and what that was like for you.
Yeah. Um, September of last year, so almost a year ago, I was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor. So it was growing on the nerves that connected my inner ear to my brainstem, and it had grown to the point that it was right up against my brainstem, but not yet pushing to the point of being life threatening. And so I had surgery in January to remove it. And it was supposed to be one surgery, 3 days in the hospital, and then home. And, they tell you about all of the possible complications and, 1% chance of this happening, 3% chance of this happening. Well, I had a lot of those very, very tiny chances of things happening, and they all happened. And it, got to the place that I ended up having 2 surgeries and was in the hospital for 17 days. I developed blood clots in my brain. It became life-threatening, which was not what anybody anticipated. And there was a time after my first surgery that every time I would close my eyes, I would see a perimeter, of the African animals, and they were just patrolling constantly, and it I knew it was very real. It was not a hallucination or anything like that. It was the energy of all of those animals in a very protective way, and, the amount of support I received from my community, but also from the animals when was in the hospital, was part of what I think saved my life during that time.
Yeah, and I was on your collective text, list, so that your
Mhm.
family
Mhm.
and whoever was communicating about what was taking place. So I checked in a number of times, and I also saw the large cats. I saw specifically both male and female lions. It seemed like there were more females, but there were a few males, and they were just circled around you, like they were faced inward,
Mhm.
and they were like, we're protecting, we're not letting anything in that shouldn't be in here, and we're sending her power energy. We're sending power energy just by being here. And and then later, when you were struggling with consciousness, you were kind of in and out. The animals that you have helped throughout your life, many, many,
Mhm.
um, kind of came and showed up to me and just said, you need to let her know that we're all here and we're giving back. She's given so much to us, and we're here giving back to her right now. And she needs to know that because she may not be able to know it. I think you told me later that you had an awareness of that, even going in and out of consciousness.
Mm.
But yeah, that was a message that came through really powerfully.
Wow.
Well,
That's really fascinating.
yeah, that was pretty remarkable. And, recovering, I mean, I'm still recovering. And in recovering from that surgery, it feels very much so like when I moved to end of life care, and that provided a time of opening. It feels like that's what's happening now, too. I have not been able to physically return to work. I have not been able to physically return to all of the aspects of my life. I say this with a smile on my face, like, I was a very capable person before. Um, and that was something I prided, myself in, and I have been asked over the last 7 months to set that down and, just heal, and that has been an truly difficult lesson, and it's enabled me to really make time, and space and be able to do more animal communication, and, whether or not I want it or not, it's caused a shift away from my veterinary practice and towards animal communication in a way that I think is gonna end up being very beautiful.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, you are offering professional um, animal communication sessions, right?
I
And I
am.
know you're also taking care of the administration part of your
Absolutely.
veterinarian
Yeah,
practice.
my
Yeah.
veterinary practice, I mean, I have an amazing team, and we are still helping families every day in Atlanta. And I still, like you said, I still run that practice. But I just physically am not able to see clients myself right now. Um, but I am offering animal communication sessions because I can do that from home.
Yeah. And then I just finally also wanted to make sure that we're clear on what the focus is of your current veterinarian practice.
Yes. So with that practice, we are a mobile end of life care practice. So we offer in-home euthanasia and a little bit of quality of life assessments.
Hmm.
We do have an office, but the majority of the work, and that's in South Decatur, but the majority of the work we do is in families' homes through Metro Atlanta.
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
awesome.
And because everything that we do with animal communication is virtual, I get to do that all over the world, which is awesome.
Oh, that's super cool.
I love that. So, do you have quite a number of people on an international scale at this time, or are you
Not
still building up
yet.
our?
I'm ready.
You may have to learn a new
That's the
human language
invitation.
so that, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, and that's the invitation to the listeners. Yeah,
That's right.
and the way to get in touch with you will be
There'll be a link in
the
the description of the
yeah.
podcast, and then you can connect to Lauren, and then see about their veterinary practice and her animal communication sessions.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I know, Lauren, that you have a meeting coming up. Does it feel like we're completing here? Is there anything else that wants to be brought out by either Dan or Lauren, either one of you?
I'm just so appreciative of a really soft place to talk about this.
Mm.
Yeah, and we're very appreciative to have you here. I already have mentioned to a few people that I know that we were doing this interview today, and they were like clapping their hands and they can't wait. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be sending out quite a few links to a number of people who are just waiting
Awesome.
excitedly to hear you speak.
I likewise had the same. A lot of people very interested to hear more about you and about the animal communication work, and I think there's quite a lot of interest in this topic as the bond between animal and human is regrowing. And just I want to echo the same amount of gratitude, Lauren, for coming on and sharing a lot of even more personal aspects about your relationship to the animals and what you've gone through to get to this point. And I think there's just so much value for anybody listening to just hear your experiences and also everything that you've had to go through, all the challenges and the growth to get to this point, and really honoring and following your path and seeing where it leads you. And sometimes that's a very scary thing. So just really commend you for having the courage, the lioness courage, to really to hear that calling and really step through it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So as we close for today, if you're in a space to do so, bringing the eyes to a close and then just bringing the body to stillness. And in this last couple moments here, just reflecting on everything that we've received. And just feeling the gratitude for Lauren, feeling the gratitude to all of the pets, all of the wild animals, domestic animals, and the pivotal roles that they play as our companions, as our teachers, as our guides, as our protectors. And imbibed with that gratitude, taking a deeper breath in. And exhaling out, releasing anything that we don't need. Again, thank you so much to our special guest, Lauren, and my co-host, Amy. And we really appreciate you guys for listening, and hope to hear from you and what your thoughts are about Lauren, her experience in animal communication. And again, links are in the description if you'd like to connect with her and reach out for a session, or if you also need some end-of-life care for your pet. Thank you guys so much, and hope you have a great rest of the day.